I got home and getting ready for bed, and it hit me all of a sudden. I said something incorrectly. I'm sure I probably said other things incorrectly, but only one thing came to my mind. I told my daughter Julia that there was a mixture of when the church oversaw all the studies of education, and there's a blending of church and school, and I said that was called scholarship. That's not what it was called. It's called scholasticism. So if you lost sleep at night, I'm sorry. I misspoke. And it hit me as soon as I got home. I went, oh, I meant to say scholasticism. Okay, hey, let's get a quick review. If you did not cover this already, you're just going to say this is super fast, but it is super fast as a review. Why you're a Christian, I encourage you to think about that. 1 Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. It's really good to practice ahead of time instead of the time when it's kind of in the moment. So you go to church and you go, yeah, why do you do that? Or even better yet, why are you a Christian? It's better ahead of time to practice. What would I say? Why am I a Christian? So now is the time as we do this study and forever to think about that. What would I say to those words? And then I talked about the various needs to be ready to have reasons for our faith. Before I give reasons, I said several things about this. You can know something and not be certain. That's really important, and so forth. I'm going to get into definition. Atheism, remember, means it forever, and every dictionary ever, meant no God exists. It's the proposition, no God exists, like no elephant exists in this room. But nowadays, the average atheist you meet won't say that. They'll say, I'm an atheist. It means I don't believe God exists. So they've shifted from a proposition that's either true or false to a psychological state. I don't believe it. And they do that typically because they're trying to avoid the burden of proof. But nevertheless, always ask the person what you are. If they say I'm an atheist, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by the word atheist? I'm agnostic. That means I don't know. In the strongest sense, it means, and you can't either. Nobody can know if there's a God. And in the weaker form, it's I don't know. And I've heard both. I've met agnostics who are the weak form, I'm not sure, I don't know, and the strong, and no one can. And that's an interesting conversation. Theism and deism are both worldviews. These are not worldviews. You will hear Christians say atheism and not, these are worldviews. They're mistaken. They are not worldviews. They are not. They are not. Theism and deism are. Theism and deism have something in common. They believe in an all-powerful creator God that is not part of the universe. The difference is theists believe that God has revealed him or itself. Deists do not believe God has revealed himself. It's about revelation. That's the distinction, really. So a deist says, oh yeah, there's an all-powerful God, kind of like he wound up and created a clock, wound it all up, and then left us alone. That's a deist. Theist says, no, he wound it all up and stays very active and interacts with us all the time. We watched the video by C.S. Lewis. If you remember C.S. Lewis, I gave the analogy, instead of a theist, we're a Christian theist. I am a Christian theist. I should speak for you. As a Christian theist, and really there's only three theisms: Christian theism, Islam, so Muslim theist, and then of course Jewish. Three kinds of theisms. As a Christian theist, well, all the theists believe, since the all-creator, powerful God made the universe, he's not in the universe. And so C.S. Lewis watched the video, and he was reflecting on when the cosmonaut Gagarin went out to space and said, I didn't see God anywhere. And Lewis said, of course you didn't. That is, no Christian theist would ever think you'd find God with binoculars or a telescope. He's not an element, he's not in the universe, he created the universe. In fact, to have the right apparatus to find God, you don't need a telescope or a microscope or anything. What you need is to reflect on the inside of you, which Lewis will talk about tonight, the moral law. When you reflect on yourself, you realize that's when you really can sense God's presence. Now, that's not the only way to do it, but that was the point of that video. He said the analogy of theism is much more like Shakespeare is the author of a play. Shakespeare's all around it because he's the author of it all. Or even better yet, it's like Dante writing himself into the play. Dante's both the author and a character in the play. The analogy breaks down because the characters don't have free will, but you get the point. Religion, of course, is the name I use to talk about any kind of Christianity is a religion. It is, has moral code, authoritative book, sacred rites and rituals, and so forth. But the main point I made about religion was this. The average person you talk to today when they talk about religion is that religion for them has shifted completely from knowledge, which is the way everybody used to think about it, to now it's preference. And that's all. So for you to talk about Christianity being the way is just like saying your love of Taco Bell is the only way to eat food. You sound so stupid and bigoted and like, what? You just sound crazy. Why would you tell everyone there's plenty of restaurants, dummy? That's what they think about you if you think Jesus is the only way. Because it's no longer about knowledge, it's just a preference you have. Yeah, it works for me. I like to join a little bit of Islam and Judaism and karma and reincarnation and Jesus as a moral teacher. You just kind of blend it all together and it's a big religion buffet. That's the average of Western way. And what I'm saying, in the Christian worldview, that's false nonsense. Religion is not a preference. Religion is based on propositions that are true or false. Either Jesus existed or he did not. Either he is and was the Messiah or he is not. If he is, Christians are right, which means Jews are wrong. If he is not the Messiah, that means Christians are wrong and Jews are right. We can't both be right. And logic is the law of the excluded middle. You can't be both and. So religion is a kind of knowledge. Jesus was raised from the dead or he was not. Well, I like to believe he was raised. Good. That has nothing to do with Christianity. That's about your psychological state. I'm glad you like to believe in Jesus. Some people like to believe in Santa Claus. It makes you feel happy and make you a good little boy and girl. Santa is not real. You see how your preference for something is not the same as the proposition itself. So when you say you're a Christian, which is why I encourage you to think you're a Christian, why you're a Christian, I hope at some point you say because it's true. Christianity is true. I like to believe in true things. That is, I think it actually affects reality. That there really is a God who's overseeing the world and so forth. You watch that video. We talked about naturalism and scientism. Naturalism is a worldview. So it is never, ever, ever Christianity versus science. That doesn't make any sense. Science is a methodology. Naturalism and Christianity are both worldviews. Naturalism, and I give the analogy of the fishbowl, naturalism says that all that exists is the universe and everything in the universe exists of matter and energy. And that's it. Everything's made of matter and energy. Every single thing. And so Christians say, no, it's not. There's the universe, and then there's other realms that God has created, the heavenly realms. So nature is not all there is. A naturalist says you're wrong. Well, naturalists aren't naturalists because they've done a bunch of scientific study and come to that conclusion. It's a philosophical view of the world, of the universe. There's no scientific apparatus that will lead you to that conclusion. And because they're naturalists and everything's made of matter and energy, what do we use to study matter and energy? What methodology? We use science to study matter and energy. Well, when you start saying science is the only arbiter of knowledge and truth, we call that scientism or logical positivism. And that's number 7 on your handout. Is this ringing a bell? Those who were here last time? I know it's kind of rapid. Sorry if it's ringing a bell. So scientism and naturalism both are false. The reason why they're self-contradictory. A naturalist says that all that exists is matter and energy, which means the statement, all that exists is matter and energy, is not made of matter and energy. Statements aren't made of matter and energy. It becomes self-refuting. Scientism says only thing that exists or can be shown to be true is demonstrated by the scientific method. I want to say is that statement verified by the scientific method? The answer is no, it's not. It's a philosophical view. So science doesn't get me here. Philosophy does. Good. Let's talk about philosophy. We will later on, but that's fine. But most atheists are naturalists. They think all that exists is matter and energy. That's it. So if I'm coming to a naturalist and say, where does that food come from? The naturalist says, I don't know, but somewhere it's from in the bowl. Some kind of quantum field is creating these food particles. Well, how do you think that? Well, do you have evidence for that? No, I don't, but we'll find it eventually. Why is that? Because that's all that exists is the bowl. Well, what do you mean? Sometimes the thing up there I'm going to call a hand looks like it drops it off. No. No, there's no such thing as a hand out there because there is no out there. How do you know that? Because this is all that exists. That's what happens over and over. Hey, Tim. So that's all of reality.
Yeah, everything okay.
Hey, Ben. So, and then we talk about Ian Hutchinson, who talked about scientism. Okay, that leaves me in about 8 minutes a quick review. So, I'll break a breath. Any questions or comments on anything? This is not your only last chance, but anything at all from last week, particularly that you go, David, can you please do a better job explaining that, or follow-up questions? Anything at all? Yeah.
I had that scholarship, but you already explained that. So
Good. Yeah. Scholarships class says, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Don't forget, you can find the handout I'm going through now on Facebook. If you're watching now, of course, and later on, or maybe on YouTube, you can always get the handout I'm referencing. It's on our church's website. It's on our church's website on hillchurchfamily.org, hillchurchfamily.org. Go to Ministries, at the tab Ministries, and it's on Local and Global Outreach. Local and Global Outreach. So hillchurchfamily.org, under Ministries, Local and Global Outreach. Oh yeah, we talked about event causation, but I'm going to skip ahead of it. Okay, no questions, we'll go ahead. Anything at all? Okay. Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay. What would it take for you to believe something? I mean, really deep down, like real. What would make you convinced of something? So, before... I would never... We're going to talk about evidence and some scientific evidence and so forth. I want to say something now, and I'm going to try to remember to say it at the very end as well of this section, all the way through page, well, really through page 6, through number 6, through page 5. I would never place your faith, your trust in God or Christian message based on your knowledge of science. Don't let what scientists discover be your bedrock foundation of faith. I wouldn't do that. I would not do that. I think there are things that scientists can demonstrate that, and I'll talk about in a second, that point to God, but I would not put your faith on that foundation. So I said that up front, and I'm going to say at the end, you'll see why. So when you think about something that make you believe something, what would it take? Why do you believe or disbelieve something? Many people disbelieve because of terrible trauma. I will never come to believe, let's talk about religion or Christianity in particular. I will never come to believe that ever. Why? Because a priest molested me. Because, these are things I've heard, because a pastor molested me or took advantage of me. Because I had a mom or dad who was a pastor and they shoved it down our necks and throats, whatever that means. I had an uncle who's a missionary. I know this is another one I heard. My friend's very close friend was a missionary for 30 or 40 years, and he molested me and all my siblings. So these are all kinds of things that happen for a person to go through that typically will cause them to disbelieve something. There's been literature written by pros that go through, you're real professionals, therapists, that go through all some of the world's major atheists, and at least in that book, all of the ones had daddy issues. Every one of them. That's not got to be, I don't think that's the explanation for every time someone's an atheist. What I'm saying is, there's all kinds of reasons to disbelieve. It works both ways. Why do you believe? Well, because I had a really good, nice grandpa, and I like to picture God like grandpa. Because I believed in Santa until I was 18, and then I thought, well, hey, I can't believe that anymore, because maybe that's the real, well, I'll just have a pick a new figure called Santa. So we can believe because we just want to go to heaven. There's all kinds of reasons. But if you think about for Christianity, or any religion, and I like to do this to myself all the time, I hope to be as objective as I can be. If let's assume for a second no one in this room is a Mormon, which I'll talk about in a little bit, an LDS. The answer is why not? My question is why not? If you're not a Jew, if you're not a Buddhist right now, why are you not those things? And if you said something like, well, let's assume for a second you looked into it. A lot of people are like, I never even thought about it, never looked at what they covered. But let's assume for a second you did. Why would you not? And if I said right now, this week, before we meet next week, would you take me on the challenge to really study, read the Book of Mormon, and come back and let's see, what you think about your research? The odds are, when I've said that kind of stuff, and probably here too and online, the odds are probably high. You'd probably say, I'm not really interested in doing that. A lot of people, especially if you're a Christian, go, nah, I'm all right. The answer is, my question would be, why? What is it about these other religions you go, nah. Because that's what atheists do to you. That's what they do to you. They go, man, come on, man. Have you ever thought about God before? Oh, who cares? Have you ever thought about Buddhism? No, not really. Well, there you go. It works both ways. And so we can spend some time on psychology. If you want to, we can. But I'm going to move on. That is to say, when we talk about Christianity or anything in life, what would it take for you to believe something? And for some things, for some people, a Facebook post is enough for you to believe something, right? It's something as simple as CNN or Fox News, and it's law, depending on your persuasion. I know people that, you're on the list. Sometimes maybe it's something serious. Maybe it's something. Maybe if the weatherman's depending on the nature of the evidence. Maybe it's the weather. I go to the Weather Channel. You think about that for a second. Now, not everyone needs evidence to believe in Christianity. Not everyone does. That's okay. That's okay. There's a whole branch of Christianity, a whole kind of thinking, not a branch, but called the Reformed tradition. And Reformed epistemology says, I don't need evidence at all. I just have an awareness of God. I have an awareness. There's a Latin expression for that. Anyway, I just have an awareness, evidence, schmevidence. Evidence will never compel anybody. That's one view. I don't have that view, but you might. That's fine. Some people say, I don't have any need evidence because I just believe. Okay. Well, I personally do, which is why I'm doing this class, and it didn't last for one night. I need it. The real reason why I believe Christianity is true is because I've seen too many change lives because they've given themselves to Jesus. That's the real gut level, bottom level reason why I think Christianity is true. I've seen too many change lives. Bottom level. In a court of law, what's the real gut level reason? That's my reason. I've seen too many people's lives changed. People go, well, people change lives in Islam. No, not in the way like this. I've never heard or read about anything like this. Well, people can believe things and be passionate about it, and they're mistaken. Yep, passion is irrelevant. Passion doesn't mean you're true. You can be passionately wrong. But I've seen people's lives change. I've seen people who are raging alcoholics never touch a drop again, ever. I've seen people, the most rageful punk fathers you've ever met, who used to abuse their children over a night, never do it again. And their families weep every time they talk about the change Jesus. I've seen it. And I'm convinced I have a relationship with God, just like I'm convinced I'm married. And you have a hard time convincing me I'm wrong, though I could be, right? That's possible. My first-hand direct knowledge of God provides the most compelling evidence for me. My first-hand direct knowledge of God provides the most compelling evidence for me. This direct knowledge is falsifiable. It's very important. It's falsifiable. To demonstrate that my belief in Christianity is unwarranted, that is, you're irrational, you need to demonstrate either my religious experiences are delusional, or I suffer from a psychological disorder, or the evidence that I believe supports my religious experience is false. I'll say that one more time, because this is exactly, I've told atheists, here's how you can demonstrate I'm wrong. All you got to do. I'm showing you my proverbial cards. I'm telling you the reason why I'm convinced that I have first-hand knowledge of God himself. You either need to demonstrate that my religious experiences are based on a psychological disorder or a rare delusion. You need to. And as far as I know, I suffer from no serious psychological disorder. But that's possible, right? The second thing is, you would have to, or you could demonstrate that the evidence I have to support my experience, that foundation, is all false. So if someone says, last night an alien visited me, and I just believe it, I believe it. Well, what did the alien look like? Well, I don't know. He was this, and there's no corroborating evidence, and no one's ever talked about aliens, so all the evidence you give for that experience is gone, then it's much more likely you suffer from some kind of brain issue. So either the experience never happened, or all the reasons you give to support it are wrong. That's the way that's how you dissuade someone. Now, so what I'm going to do in my study is I'm going to talk about those two things in reverse order. I'm going to tell you the reasons why I believe what I believe, and at the very end, I'll talk about religious experience. But this matters because, look on page 3 for your handout. That's my reflection. What would it take for you to believe something? And I'm wondering if you wrote that down, what would it take? Really, I've met and heard atheists. I believe in Christianity if God wrote his name on the moon. If on every single DNA strand it said, I'm Yahweh in Hebrew. Which seems, I don't know why they think God speaks Hebrew, but more power to you. If God showed up right now in a dream, had God saved my dad from cancer? Had God saved my little baby girl from dying in the wreck? If he shows up right now, they give these tests for him, then I'll believe. Well, what you're going to hear, atheists typically say things like that, and they typically say things like this. And that's why I'm going to my handout here. Scientists believe in facts and evidence. Religious people believe in faith. You will hear that all the time if you talk to atheists, or you just will. Scientists believe in facts and evidence. Religious people believe in faith. That's false nonsense for official diction. Well, I'll talk about it in a second. Or you're going to hear, religious people are proud of believing in something for which there is no evidence. Religious people are proud of believing in something for which there is no evidence. That's also false nonsense. For any Christian actually informed well by the Bible, such statements are manifestly false. And this is very important. To have faith or trust does not mean to believe something for which there is no evidence. That is not what it means. I need you Christians, at least who watch online and listen to me now, hear this very well. Because well-intentioned Christian teachers, preachers, and lay people have said this for years and years. Well, I don't have evidence. I just believe, or I just have faith. When you say statements like that, you create a dichotomy between evidence and facts and knowledge and subjective choosing to believe, even though that's completely gone and absent. And so another way we describe that kind of faith in American English is blind faith. I just believe. And then it'll get even worse, against all the evidence. I've heard preachers say, the more the evidence is against it, you got to dig your heels in. That shows how much faith you really have. I can't believe how false that is. That is false on every level. It's false philosophically, it's false lexicographically in the English language, and most importantly, it's false in the Bible. In the Hebrew and in the Greek, I'll just pick on Greek to save time. In the Greek word pistis means to have trust in or have belief in. To unpack a little more, it means to have a reason to trust in. It's much more like saying, I trust my wife. I have a reason to trust her. I trust Tim to get me home. I have a reason to trust him. Do you trust him? Yeah. Do I trust him like I trust my wife? Well, no. I've been married for a long time. Okay. 21 years?
21 and a half.
21 and a half, yes, just over 21 years. So, of course, I know her a lot more. So my level in our trust bank account, that her ability to care for me and not take advantage of me on the way home or whatever, is a lot. That bank account's bigger than Tim. Great, but I still trust him. Well, you see my point? So in the Bible, it's the same way. When the New Testament talks about putting our faith in Jesus, it is not meaning put a blind faith in Jesus. It is not meaning, who's to say, the resurrection just taken on faith. I cannot overemphasize how much that's bad reading of the Bible. And so if you think that, I mean it's an encouragement, if you think that you have that kind of faith because that's the right faith to have, you're not a villain. I'm just saying that's not biblical faith. That's not biblical faith. Faith is, I have a reason to trust you. We have a reason to trust you. And I'll give you so I do put my trust in God, and I believe in Him, and I believe that. And those are two different things. But I have a reason for that. So when an atheist comes by and says, that's what you Christian, you love to believe in stuff for which there's no evidence, that's false. Some people come to believe for a wide range of regions. Now what I've done is I put in the U.S. Federal Rules of Evidence. The U.S. Federal Rules of Evidence, which is on your handout. I had a long, good talk with a really, really good lawyer several years ago about all this stuff. So I'm trying to be as aboard, up front as possible. This is not some quick religious sleight of hand. Evidence, evidence, evidence. And then he says, and then unicorns, wink, wink. We all know it's not true. I'm trying to be as above. So when I use the word evidence, I use it in the word the way any technical person. So I'm just reading from the handout, right? A thing, the existence or characteristics of which are relevant and material. And I added this, for example, the strength of the evidence. I think I added that proviso, that explanation. The existence or characteristics of which are relevant and material, the strength of the evidence. The Federal Rules Evidence 401, evidence is relevant if, A, it has any tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence. And B, the fact is of consequence in determining the action. So to be relevant, a particular item of evidence need not make the fact for which it is offered certain. I didn't put all this in your notes, but I'm continuing the quote. It does not need to make the action certain or even more probable than not. All that is required is that it have some tendency to increase the likelihood of the fact for which it is offered. Do you understand that? It makes it even a little more likely. That's evidence. It's a little more likely that fact is true. That's evidence. That's evidence. Listen, and let this sink in because this is the right frame of mind to get through the rest of the study. Nearly all evidence in a courtroom is historical. You're trying to determine whether or not an event occurred. Think about that. Because you're not time traveling. You're not reliving a murder or a divorce situation. It's always about the past. It's always about the past. And in the court, American court, Western court around the world, they bring in evidence to support claims based on something that happened in the past. Well, Christianity is no different. It's a religion based on claims, chiefly, which are predicated upon past occurrences. Chiefly, not only because I think that at times I have present religious experiences that corroborate my belief, but chiefly it's based on that. Chiefly it is. Now, there are two kinds of evidence, and I will use these two lines of evidence for the rest of the study. You'll see it'll flow right out of it. Well, sorry, I will try to flow. There's direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence supports the truth of an assertion directly. That is, without need for any additional evidence or inference. It's directly. I want to make sure of that. Okay, good. Oh, yeah, I thought so. Good. You don't need anything else or inference. For example, in criminal proceedings, Elaine loves this kind of TV show and documentaries. In criminal proceedings, such evidence might consist of first-hand witness to the event. First-hand witness to the event, that's direct evidence. So if you think the resurrection appearances of Jesus are predicated on first-hand evidence, that's direct evidence. That's someone at the scene of the crime. I saw the car, I saw this and that. I saw it. And what I'm saying, I said this earlier, the gut level, bottom level reason why I'm a Christian is my direct evidence of my changed life, and then the direct evidence of seeing other people's lives change dramatically in a very short period of time. That's direct evidence. Other direct evidence would be dry blood, fingerprints, a murder weapon, DNA samples, cast of footprints or tires at the scene of the crime, and so forth. Ancient evidence would include archaeological artifacts like pottery, DNA, coins, drawings, buildings, artifacts, manuscripts, all the stuff we do in scholarship when we look a long time ago. Little footnote, a little bit, I'm going to go to Mormonism in just a second. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for to see if something is historical. Is there direct evidence? Circumstantial evidence supports the truth of an assertion indirectly. It relies on inference to connect it to a conclusion of fact, like a witness seeing a person over a dead person with a gun. I used to walk in and Hayden and Joy's knocked out on the ground. All right. She's crying, and there's Hayden. I walk in the room. I didn't see it, but there's Hayden. There's my daughter crying. That's circumstantial. Huh? She framed you. And that's a possible thing that never worked in your defense. But that's circumstantial evidence. If someone said in a courtroom, did Hayden do it? I said, well, I didn't see the crime, but he's going to do the time. Anyway, so circumstantial evidence. Hearing a noise, that's circumstantial. Because you don't know exactly, you're inferring that noise. It sounded like a gun shooting. Former human behavior, he's always been brutal. Patterns, policies. So on its own, circumstantial evidence allows for more than one explanation. And in the normal reasoning of people, we always say, that's circumstantial. That, you've heard that popular language? That's circumstantial. When someone curls in that's circumstantial, they're not a lawyer. That's silly. Direct and circumstantial are absolutely equal in the court. They're both legit, legal forms of evidence. It's just that circumstantial evidence has more than one explanation. Different pieces of circumstantial evidence may be required so that each corroborates the conclusion drawn from the others. And then together, they more strongly support one particular inference over another. And what in circumstantial evidence, we do this all the time. You know, if you leave here and go, I don't remember that vocabulary, fine. But I want you to get what I'm doing. This is called abductive reasoning. Abductive reasoning is when you use circumstantial evidence to come to a conclusion. For example, I'm walking down the sidewalk out here, and there's not now, but let's say it was a sunny day, and look down, it's a dark spot on the pavement. Now, if I dry erase the board, I'd say, what are the possible things? What is that? Why is it dark? Well, because I know past, I've looked at water before on sidewalks, that I bet that's water. But let's to make sure, I get down close, maybe I can smell it. Doesn't smell like urine, doesn't smell like Kool-Aid, doesn't smell like whatever. I could take it to a laboratory. Yep, H2O. It is water. Okay, it's water. How did water get there? And so I'm, urine, all the stuff. What am I saying? Okay, that's not that. It is water. So it is water. How do water? Is it one massive water drop? One massive water drop. That's possible. Probably not very likely. If I were in a court of law. And I go on and I look for a little bit. Come to find out, and then also it's not just all equal. Like an equal explosion is to the side. It's almost like water was shoved over there. Then I go over a little bit on the side on the street, and there's a shrapnel of plastic. I bet that's a balloon. I take it to the analyst. It is a balloon. Now I already know what it is, right? It's not a dog, it's not Pete, it's not Hayden. It's a water balloon. And I realize I look up, and maybe there's some little kids over there going, ha ha ha. That's abductive reasoning. That's looking at all the circumstantial evidence and trying to figure out of all the data, of all this evidence, this stuff, if I'm recreating maybe not necessarily what happened even, but just what caused that thing. That's what all of us do all the time. But why did this mess get on the floor? Oh, look, there's an orange thing on the counter. That's a pumpkin pie. I bet aliens dropped it off. No, I'm going to say I bet Elaine made that for me. I mean, that's the first we start putting other pieces. Well, that's what we do in the real world, and that's what people do in a courtroom. You have two sides looking at all the evidence. They put all the pieces together and say, this, all based on that bullet hole and that this, here's what we think, here's the narrative we're presenting as the truth. The other says, look at the exact same evidence and says, no, here's what I think. Well, when it comes to Christianity, that's exactly what I do too. Let's do the same thing. So the rest of the study, I'm going to show you a bunch of evidences and facts that if an atheist or Satan worshiper or whatever right beside me, they look at some of the same things and go, well, that doesn't count as evidence. That doesn't count. Okay, that counts. I hear you. But your narrative's all wrong. That's all wrong. No, not all that's wrong. They would look at the same, like in a courtroom. Like I said last week, you're the judge and jury. You decide. And maybe I don't convince you. Now, typically the most compelling evidence is direct evidence from an impartial witness, especially if it's against the interests of the witness. That's the best. When a Republican says a Democrat really didn't kill him. If Trump said to Pelosi, yeah, she didn't steal that, it's probably likely she didn't steal it. You get my point, right? It's probably likely. And facts you get from cross-examination, facts you get reluctantly. Yeah, I guess I was there. That reluctant stuff, this is stuff that makes it more likely. So you want impartial witnesses, that's the best. Now, bias, interest, prejudice, all the grounds doubt the credibility of a witness, of course, and his competence. It's not valid objection to say the statement of a witness is self-serving. Presumably, most or all statements by party witnesses are intended to be self-serving. So, I am utterly convinced that the proposition that Christianity is true can be demonstrated by both direct and circumstantial evidence. I'm utterly convinced that the proposition Christianity is true, or why I know it's true, right, is demonstrated both by direct and circumstantial evidence. And I'm going to begin with circumstantial, then move to direct. And before I do that, I'll tell you exactly this. So now we're on the next page. The way I think about it is 3 layers of probability. This is what I think about. And I like to start from the farthest out and move inward. And that's what I do. I do that in conversation too, depending. They say, tell them about Jesus. I go, let me step 1 is God. I don't do that. I mean, I start where they're at. But if I start from scratch, I always start way out top. This is what I do. Okay, you don't have to do it this way. I think what I call the quite probable and very probable, and then I get to virtually certain. And so in my study, I will present it that way. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So now, I will use direct and circumstantial evidence to support these claims for why I think Christianity is true. So we're going to start with quite probable. And I have got 7, 8, 9, what do I got?
7 right here.
Starts with,
Yeah.
no, 10. Oh, I did even it out. All the way to 10, not page 6.
Yeah, okay.
I've got 10 reasons why I think it is quite probable that God is the best explanation. I'm not even going to go to Jesus yet. Because when I get to Jesus, when I get to the New Testament, I get there. And so if you want, I will tell you my elevator speech. Here's my 15, 20 second, I haven't timed myself a long time. But it's down to about 3 things. If someone says, why are you a Christian? Are you a Christian? Yeah, I am. Why is that? If someone said, why is that? I say, because I'm convinced Christianity is true. Why is that? For 3 reasons. I'm convinced God is the best explanation for a wide experience of facts about reality. I'm convinced that Christianity has the best, most reliable historical evidence of all the world's religions. And third, which makes me almost virtually certain, is my own religious experience. So I start big with God and things that point to him. My step 2 is Christianity in particular. That's historical issues, and that's my training, my specialty. And the third is my own religious firsthand direct evidence. That's what I do. You don't do it that way, but that's what I do. Okay, any questions or comments about evidence, all that jazz? Anything so far? You still awake? Anything? Anything online, Elaine? Anybody's asking anything? No? Anything at all? Need to repeat? No? None? Okay, so your lack of question means you just so on top of it, right? Okay. I think God is the best explanation. For
What was that question?
Circumstantial evidence has more than one. What?
possible explanation. Possible explanation. Very good. So back to my analogy of the water balloon on the ground. Before I was thought, to start with the shrapnel, that water could have been multiple things. Maybe it's not water. Maybe it's urine. Maybe it's blood. So I go, what's a dark spot? Yeah, but there could be a lot of things. So you start narrowing and narrowing down. And so if I came right off the bat and said, dark spot, water balloon, the other person on the other court side might go, that could be anything. You go, you're right. I need to give more. So what if I can't find anyone who says, I threw it, that's direct evidence. Or I saw him throw it, that's direct evidence. I can't find anything like that. There's no videotape, nothing direct. I'm stuck with circumstantial, which is, then I need to put that piece to that piece. Is that an angle? It's this. I bring in a world's leading physicist who goes, look at the angle of the, right? So as I bring up more and more circumstantial evidence, then you go, you're right. You put all the pieces together, it's a stinking what? It's very likely. Very good. So it's when you have a little bit, circumstantial evidence is frowned upon because it's a little bit. When you get a lot of different pieces together, circumstantial evidence becomes very powerful. My entire dissertation is nothing but circumstantial, nothing but. But I mean, and that was on purpose. I mean, my supervisor goes, yeah, it's circumstantial. I said, yeah, it is. And I'm trying to bring all the pieces together and paint a portrait of why I think something exists. And good question. This is a good question, I think. So I think God is the best explanation. Notice what I said. This is all very deliberate. I didn't say God is the only explanation. I don't think God is the only explanation. I use this on purpose. I think God is the best explanation. So I've talked to skeptics and atheists that go, well, there's all kinds of things. Right? Right? So what's your best reason for it? What's the best explanation you think it is? The best. Well, aliens. Okay, unicorn. Yep, Santa Claus could have done it. What's the best one for you? So I don't think all those reasons explain they provide the best evidence for that leads to that point. I think God is the best explanation, but not the only, but I think it's the best. And that's what I care about is the best. The first thing is why anything exists at all. Now think about that. Why is there a universe? Why is it even here? Even if the universe were eternal, why is it here? You ever ponder that for a second? There could be nothing. Why is there something? Why is there anything at all? The universe needs an explanation. Everything needs an explanation. I mean, think about that. The basic elements of the universe, quarks and leptons and the smallest building blocks of the universe, the smallest ones, they're either necessary, they're brute facts of reality, or they're contingent. Contingent means occurring or existing only if certain circumstances are the case. That is, contingent means dependent on. It didn't have to be that way. I see no reason to think the basic building blocks are necessary. Why couldn't they have been styrofoam? Or cheese? Or Britney Spears? Why does it have to be those things? What is it about building blocks that make them so necessary? Either they're necessary or they're contingent. That's it. Well, if they're contingent, I mean, then Why is it here? And Bill Craig does an outstanding argument. It's called the contingency argument, and it goes like this. So I hope this is real short.
We live in an amazing universe. Have you ever wondered why it exists? Why does anything at all exist? Gottfried Leibniz wrote, the first question which should rightly be asked is, why is there something rather than nothing? He came to the conclusion that the explanation is found in God. But is this reasonable? Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence. If the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is God. The universe exists. From these, it follows logically that the explanation of the universe's existence is God. The logic of this argument is airtight. If the three premises are true, the conclusion is unavoidable. But are they more plausibly true than false? The third premise is undeniable for anyone seeking truth. But what about the first premise? Why not say, the universe is just there, and that's all? No explanation needed. End of discussion. Well, imagine you and a friend are hiking in the woods and come across a shiny sphere lying on the ground. You would, naturally, wonder how it came to be there. And you'd think it odd if your friend said, there's no reason or explanation for it. Stop wondering. It just is. And if the ball were larger, it would still require an explanation. In fact, if the ball were the size of the universe, the change in its size wouldn't remove the need for an explanation. Indeed, curiosity about the existence of the universe seems scientific and intuitive. Someone might say, if everything that exists needs an explanation, what about God? Doesn't he need an explanation? And if God doesn't need an explanation, then why does the universe need an explanation? To address this, Leibniz makes a key distinction between things that exist necessarily and things that exist contingently. Things that exist necessarily exist by necessity of their own nature. It's impossible for them not to exist. Many mathematicians think that abstract objects like numbers and sets exist like this. They're not caused to exist by something else. They just exist by necessity of their own nature. Things that exist contingently are caused to exist by something else. Most of the things we're familiar with exist contingently. They don't have to exist. They only exist because something else caused them to exist. If your parents had never met, you wouldn't exist. There's no reason to think the world around us had to exist. If the universe had developed differently, there might have been no stars or planets. It's logically possible that the whole universe might not have existed. It doesn't exist necessarily. It exists contingently. If the universe might not have existed, why does it exist? The only adequate explanation for the existence of a contingent universe is that its existence rests on a non-contingent being, something that cannot not exist because of the necessity of its own nature. It would exist no matter what. So, everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external cause. But what about our second premise? Is it reasonable to call the explanation of the universe God? Well, what is the universe? It's all of space-time reality, including all matter and energy. It follows that if the universe has a cause of its existence, that cause cannot be part of the universe. It must be non-physical and immaterial, beyond space and time. The list of entities that could possibly fit this description is fairly short, and abstract objects cannot cause anything. Leibniz's contingency argument shows that the explanation for the existence of the universe can be found only in the existence of God, or If you prefer not to use the term God, you may simply call him the extremely powerful, uncaused, necessarily existing, non-contingent, non-physical, immaterial, eternal being who created the entire universe and everything in it.
Or God. Does that make sense? Okay, we're good. I heard the analogy one time. If someone said, oh, by the way, repeat myself, this is based on whether or not the universe is eternal, past eternal, which it is not. But let's assume for a second it is, or it had a beginning. This is still asking the same question. Why is it here? Why is there anything versus nothing? Well-known philosopher Kreeft said, it's like if someone said, I have a book that has all the answers to the test. They're talking to students because he's a professor. And they, do you want to borrow it? Sure I do. Yeah. Well, you need to go to the library and check it out. Okay, and they go to the library and hey, can I check out that book? And they go, it's not here. So-and-so has it. Okay, you give so-and-so. You have that? I don't have it. So-and-so has it. What about so-and-so? No, and they're tracking down the seventh person. You have it? No, so-and-so has it. And so-and-so. And you go backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards forever. At some point, you've got to get the book. At some point, the book exists, and you find the original book. Existence is like that. If existence is contingent, nope, so-and-so got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so. At some point, it has to stop. And that's the point. At some point, there has to be a necessary being that brings something else into existence. It's logically necessary. It has to be that way. You can't go back forever. Logically, you can't. Now, I'm done with that. I'm going to move on pretty quick on this. Any question or comments about this? So an atheist might say, yeah, like Bertrand Russell, yeah, I still believe the universe just is. No what? Okay, you can do that. You can say it just is, so what? You can. I don't. Because I'm going to ask the question, but why is it here? Well, and you either atheists go, that's just a stupid question. I don't think it's a stupid question at all. And you give the analogy of the sphere. But if anything, a box showed up on the floor, where's that from? It necessarily exists as a box. What? Well, now it's big as the state. No, it just necessarily. Why is the box here? Now it's big as a galaxy. Now it's big as solar system. It doesn't matter. It exists. Where'd it come from? It's not a dumb question. So you can dismiss it. I don't think you should. I think the only answer is God is the best explanation why anything exists at all. Now the next one moving ahead is something a lot of people are more experienced with. That is why the universe, or if there's a multi-universe, exists, why it had a beginning. The universe is not eternal. They used to call the steady state theory I'm sorry, Johnny, for a while, Johnny, you're going to be so bored. During it just hit me, man. I'll try to finish tonight. After this, we'll do much science in space. He doesn't like space. I'm sorry, but I forgot all about that.
I'm an engineer, though. I like science.
You're holding on, though.
Yeah.
You like science, not the space. Okay, well, sorry. Everybody thought the universe was in a steady state. That is, it was past eternal. Everybody did. Albert Einstein, everyone thought it. His own equations led him to believe that it was not past eternal. There was a beginning point. But he didn't like the idea, and so he made up fake numbers called imaginary time. He made up numbers to even it out so that it wouldn't go back forever. And he acknowledges that. But the universe began about, okay, if you're a young earth creationist, you're going to really disagree with this, and that's fine. We can talk after the group if you want. I'm not a young earth creationist. I think that's false. I think the universe began about 13.8 billion years ago. And a lot of people use, because of Fred Hoyle's called the Big Bang. It wasn't big and it wasn't a bang, either one, but it's stuck and we can't get rid of it now. But this initial singularity condition of the universe, it describes the initial condition of the universe, and it had a beginning. That had a beginning. The cause of the universe must not be composed, it cannot be composed of matter and energy, governed by a physical law, because that came into being. That came into being. We see these ideas, it's not exactly the same in the Bible. If you read, for example, I want to give you three different verses. I'm going to yell these out. Psalm 33:6, and then John 1:3, maybe Hebrews 11:3. Anybody want to read those out loud now? Psalm 33:6, John 1:3, and maybe Hebrews 11:3.
I got you.
John 1:3, go for it.
All things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created.
That has been created. Yeah, sometimes you can translate has come into being. Yeah, good. Anybody else?
Psalms
33?
6.
Yes, sir. Verse 6. Yes, sir.
By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth.
Good. So that's the idea that, again, they were not there, then they were there. Julia? Hebrews 11, verse 3.
By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen is not made out of what is visible.
Good, that's right. So at God's command, the scene was made out of what is invisible. I have a blog on that exact verse. You might like it. Someone in a previous church asked me something like that. Anyway, the ancient Jews seem to have thought that there was like invisible stuff, and then God took invisible stuff to make visible stuff, like Hebrews 11:3. Yeah, I know, but we can talk about that. But there are some Bible verses that seem to suggest that this same idea, that there was nothing, there was something. Now, of course, you can say Genesis 1:1. That's a different issue a little bit, but because in the beginning the earth was, doesn't matter what the Hebrew is, but it means formless and void. So in Genesis, it actually starts with some stuff from which God creates. There's not a lot of verses that talk about having that coming from a state of nothingness, besides the ones I just gave you. So the universe is not. It did not. It does not go out forever. It had a beginning, and virtually everyone thought that. If you know Hubble telescope, have you ever heard that before? Of course, so Edwin Hubble is a very well-known astrophysicist. He was doing his work on his telescope, and he discovered something amazing. What changed the scientific world is revolution. He was measuring the various ways of stars, the distance from the star to the Earth, and you can judge fairly accurately because the speed of light is a constant in a vacuum, and you can decide that the light has various waves, and the farther away it is, the wavelength our eyes perceive of the light as if the wave has been stretched out. And so if you're really close, if something's like blue's a smaller wave that is real fast. So the sky's blue because it diffuses the most in the atmosphere. That's why the sky's blue, because that part of the light ray diffuses the most. And the farther you get away and the light stretches out, it moves from the different shades of color all the way down to orange and then red. And so it's called the redshift. And so you can look at stars, and the redder they are on the spectrum means the farther away it is. And you can measure that. What Hubble discovered is not only is a redshift, he discovered that the universe, in fact, is expanding. And that was groundbreaking knowledge, because no one had ever thought that the universe was expanding. They thought it was steady. If the universe is expanding, what does that mean? The opposite is true. If you rewound the tape, it means what? You can talk.
It's small in the beginning.
They get small in the beginning. So if it's going out, you pause to the videotape, it means you rewind it, right? All the way down to a small spot. And that, by knowing the redshift proved the universe had a beginning, like that. Einstein went out to he went out to the telescope Hubble was using, and he came out and finally said, basically, okay, he convinced me. It took him to seeing the only evidence for himself. That mixed with several other tested theories has absolutely proven that the case. Not only is the universe expanding, it is speeding up. And right now there is zero explanation. I think maybe it's dark energy, dark matter, but there's no explanation that's flying right now. But the universe is expanding. Since it's expanding, it means it had a beginning point. And so this is the idea of cosmological argument.
Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be? One approach to answering this question is the cosmological argument. It goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. Is the first premise true? Let's consider. Believing that something can pop into existence without a cause is more of a stretch than believing in magic. At least with magic, you've got a hat and a magician. And if something can come into being from nothing, then why don't we see this happening all the time? No, everyday experience and scientific evidence confirm our first premise. If something begins to exist, it must have a cause. But what about our second premise? Did the universe begin, or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever. The universe is just there, and that's all. First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's the point. If the universe had been here forever, it would have run out of usable energy by now. The second law points us to a universe that has a definite beginning. This is further confirmed by a series of remarkable scientific discoveries. In 1915, Albert Einstein presented his general theory of relativity. This allowed us, for the first time, to talk meaningfully about the past history of the universe. Next, Alexander Friedmann and George Lemaitre, each working with Einstein's equations, predicted that the universe is expanding.
Notice he's a
Then
priest.
in 1929, Edwin Hubble measured the red shift in light from distant galaxies. This empirical evidence confirmed not only that the universe is expanding, but that it sprang into being from a single point in the finite past. It was a monumental discovery, almost beyond comprehension. However, not everyone is fond of a finite universe, so it wasn't long before alternative models popped into existence. But one by one, these models failed to stand the test of time. More recently, three leading cosmologists, Arvid Bort, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, proved that any universe which has on average been expanding throughout its history cannot be eternal in the past, but must have an absolute beginning. This even applies to the multiverse, if there is such a thing. This means that scientists can no longer hide behind a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Any adequate model must have a beginning, just like the standard model. It's quite plausible then that both premises of the argument are true. This means that the conclusion is also true. The universe has a cause. And since the universe can't cause itself, its cause must be beyond the space-time universe. It must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful, much like God. The cosmological argument shows that, in fact, it is quite reasonable to believe that God does exist.
Any questions or comments about that video? Yeah?
Well, I guess I never thought of the fact that because the universe is expanding, that means that it's smaller before. I guess because I've always, heard universe is expanding and whatnot.
Gotcha.
But I've never really thought that at one point it could be very, very small, relatively compared to now.
Good, yeah. You ever thought about the implications of the universe expanding? It means not infinitesimal. I know, she's crazy, isn't she? She's crazy. Good. Anything else? Questions, comments about that? Now, there might be a multiverse. Imagine a multiverse like the first universe being a bubble of gum, whatever. And then there's different models. That bubble then has minor bubbles that come off of it. Or the original bubble maker, my mouth, spews out other small bubbles. The different analogies. Some say there's bubbles in the bigger bubble. And there's no scientific evidence for that, but there's a lot of mathematics that point to that. There's a lot of mathematicians who say there's a lot of evidence to think that it's a likely scenario. That has nothing to do with the argument, and that's why I put that in parentheses. Even if that's true, the universe then becomes the whole show. So all of it. Now, I think we'll talk about that later on. Yeah, we will. We'll talk a little more about the multiverse because the possibility of that, but that's okay. Even if there is multi-universe, it had a beginning. All of it would at some stage. Well, sure seems to be. It had a beginning, universe. Okay, this is where atheists are going to respond. They're going to say this. Yeah. But the Big Bang only deals with the initial condition of the universe. People typically respond. They usually say, yeah, but the universe can create itself on a quantum level. Stephen Hawking, you know Stephen Hawking, the well-respected scientist in the wheelchair. He has a robotic voice. He died. Didn't he die a few years ago? Yeah. He said that. He said universes can create themselves on a quantum level. That quantum mechanics means that's how universes pop into existence. And so you have scientists, many of them, I won't because of time, many scientists will say that the quantum level is a state of nothingness and it comes from nothing to something. That is completely false. And it's a play on words. Quantum level, and some of you won't give a rip what I'm about to say. I'm sorry. Bear with me just for a little bit. Maybe particularly engineering nerds if you had these conversations, because not everyone talks about quantum mechanics. That's fine. And I'm not a specialist in quantum mechanics. But I want to make this very clear because this is a very common response by atheists and skeptics. Well, that's all well and good. Had a beginning. It didn't come from nothing. It came from the quantum level, so it just happens. Big deal. It happens all the time at the quantum level. Protons just pop into existence from a state of nothingness. That is false. The fundamental stuff of particle physics are called quantum fields. And they wobble and wave and they fill the whole universe. When a quantum field, which is a thing, it's not nothing, it's a sea of energy. When it waves a certain way, it behaves like a particle or an antiparticle or a collection of particles. It depends on how it's waving. There's one special way that a field can be arranged in which there are no particles. That's called the vacuum. But the field is still there. There's still a quantum vacuum. When an electron emits a photon, this is a shorthand way of saying two fields have interacted, spawning a new photon wave. And if you want more nerd, electrons have fields, which when they interact, they can change their energy into particles because of Einstein, we know that. Photons can be produced, not created from nothing. They're produced. They can be absorbed back in. They can make electrons change direction. Photons are produced or absorbed, but they're not created from nothing. And just to say this, just to show you a little quick minute video, this is for my wife who likes to talk about quantum mechanics. I just want to show you.
Quantum field theory, or QFT.
This is what it looks like.
Although each theory has its own interesting peculiarities, I want to talk a little about some general truths of all quantum fields.
Just a little bit.
In modern physics theory, one can picture all subatomic particles as beginning with a field. Then the particles we see are just localized vibrations in the field. So, according to quantum field theory, the right way to think of the subatomic world is that everywhere, and I mean everywhere, there are a myriad of fields, up quark fields, down quark fields, electron fields, etc. And the particles are just localized vibrations of the fields that are moving around. The idea can also explain how particles interact. For example, suppose you have an electron moving along. The electron is a localized vibration of the electron field. If the electron emits a photon, then the quantum field theory way of looking at things says that some of the energy of the electron field sets up a localized vibration of a photon field, which then moves away. So those are the essential features of quantum field theory. Theoretical physics simply imagines that ordinary space is full of fields for all known subatomic particles, and that localized vibrations can be found everywhere.
And I was going to play the soundtrack, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Feel the Vibration, but you wouldn't know that song because you're very holy. You're welcome. So my point right now is, I won't test you on the field theory later. My point only is, if someone responds back, no, the quantum field is nothing and the universe came from nothing, no, it's not. The quantum field is not nothing, and it's not creating a universe. Quantum fields are already there, and they're already governed by physical laws in the universe. So it's not a state of nothing. So by analogy, this is the way I like to think about it. If you don't know this, of course, the earliest biological state of a human being, you know what that's called? The Z word? Remember? Zygote. So as soon as the sperm gets in the egg and the tail breaks off, as soon as it gets inside and boom, that's a zygote. Because what happens almost instantaneously is the chromosomes start joining together. That's a zygote. So you and I were all zygotes at one point. Not pregnancy that gets killed, but a zygote, an independent human being in the earliest chromosome stage, a zygote. So if someone said, if I said, Tim, you're skeptic, no, I won't bring that. So Tim, where are you from? You say, I'm from a state of nothingness called a zygote. So, no, Tim, no. The zygote is the first stage of your development. Where are you from? To talk about that, I got to talk about a mom and dad. That's how you got to the zygote. The zygote is not where you're from. That was you. Your earliest biological state was called zygote. When most of the time when atheists talk about this, their response is, yeah, quantum theory came from nothing. No. Quantum field is the zygote. It's the earliest stage, maybe, that's the theory. Maybe the earliest known state would be that quantum field. But it already exists. It's governed by laws of physics. That didn't tell me where it came from. We're looking for a cause of the zygote, a cause of the universe. Not the initial state, where it came from. Does that make sense? So I think God is the best explanation. Atheists and skeptics respond to this by saying, not everything that comes into being has a cause. Well, it doesn't necessarily, that's the case. Some things pop into existence, then you're going to say, what pops into existence without a cause? And then they're going to say, well, like photons, electrons pop into existence all the time without a cause. To which you're going to say, now that you're experts in quantum field theory, you're going to say, that's not true at all. Photons do not pop into existence for no cause at all. They're waves and vibrations of the quantum field. They interact with the quantum fields. They don't pop into existence from nothing. So what? Well, and if that's true, if things pop into existence from nothing, as Bill Craig says, why don't horses pop into existence? Why doesn't Shakespeare pop into existence? Why don't trees pop? Why is it nothing in existence pop into existence but the universe? Why is that special? Why is nothing? I don't know. So there are responses to these things, but you'll find yourself, you can read for yourself and decide whether you think it's persuasive. So I think God's the best explanation why the universe had a beginning. No question about that at all? Any question or comments? Nothing? Floating? Elaine? No, anything online? Good. I think God's the best explanation. That was the most in-depth science you'll get. Okay, if you don't like science, you're welcome. It doesn't get, I don't think it gets that. We're not going to talk about quantum stuff. I think God's the best explanation for why the universe has constants and quantities that are fine-tuned for life. I think God is the best explanation for why there are constants and quantities that are fine-tuned for life. The laws of physics have several key parts. There's the building blocks of the universe, the stuff, right? The stuff. Protons and everything. Then there are the ways these building blocks interact, how they work around each other. These are called fundamental forces. How do they interact with one another? The laws of physics presuppose the stage, the space and time in which the building blocks exist and interact. The laws of physics presuppose that the stage in which space and time interact, they're already there. There are numbers in the equations that the theory cannot predict. You might predict there's something called gravity, but your prediction you would not predict the force of gravity. You not predict there is gravity. You can predict what the force is. You have to measure that. So, Tim can't decide, I want gravity to be this force. No, that's not how it works. We must measure them. Those are called constants in nature. Now, why do they have the value that we measure? If that question has an answer, it must go beyond our current theories. We have no idea what the force of gravity is the way it is. There's the speed of light. Why does it travel at 186 million feet per second? Why? We don't have a clue. There's no explanation for these constants, none. So fine-tuning is a technical term invented by physicists, not pastors. It's by physicists. It refers to the contrast between a wide range of possibilities and a narrow range of particular outcome or phenomenon. It's like this. I think about this sometimes. People lift weights on a bar. You can lift weights. These are the quantities and quantities on the left and right. And then it takes a little bit of motion in the wrong direction. And that happened. So that's only happened like one time to me. I mean, not that man bun. I wouldn't ever do that. But the weights, that's happened one time. So fine tuning is like having very intricate little bitty things that cannot barely move or the whole thing comes undone. So the fine tuning of the universe is that fine tuning is applied specifically to the fact this universe supports life forms. I did not say support humans, but life of any kind, amoeba. The fact the universe is so fine-tuned for any life. The claim is that small changes in these free parameters of the laws of nature, they have dramatic detrimental effects on the ability of the universe to support the complexity needed for physical life forms. So our conclusion, my conclusion, is that the fundamental properties of the universe appear to be fine-tuned for life. They're fine-tuned. We need a cosmos that expands not too fast and not too slow. The speed at which the universe is expanding is a constant. It's fine-tuned. If you hit the gas too fast, if you slow down the brakes, literally molecules would not form correctly. If it was too slow, the universe, like a tight rubber band, would go smash back on the side. If it's too fast, the molecules themselves, matter would never form. The speed is just right. You get that mixed with all kinds of other forces going on and on, it is amazing. Even if Einstein's dream, a theory of everything, there's a movie by that name, Theory of Everything. Stephen Hawking is an atheist anyway. Movie's okay. Even he wanted that one theory. Scientists still want that one, they say elegant, short, like E equals MC squared. That's my dream. Develop the theory that explains everything. Even if that's true, it wouldn't show the universe couldn't have been otherwise. It only shows that the constants are determined by some deeper theory. We still want to know why the universe obeyed that deeper theory. Why is it all these fine-tuned? Now, I'm going to give some examples, and I'm going to let this video show first, and I'm going to give you some more examples of the fine-tuning. And it is amazing.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone
Darwin claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has. He's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are three live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be light permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a light prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a light permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence to suggest that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question.
And he's an atheist.
There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
And for a lot of atheists, this is the most persuasive argument because the fine-tuning is so overwhelmingly amazing. If you, because of time, let's see. If you, I looked at books there, don't I? Yeah. Toward the very end, on top of page 5, I say for more numbers 2 to 5, read Hugh Ross, Why the Universe is the Way It Is, and Lewis and Luke Barnes, The Fortune Universe. They go through numerous examples of the fine-tuning. It's amazing. It is staggering how the numbers work out. It's not just about being lucky. People who win the lottery are lucky, and it's very improbable to go win the lottery. It's very improbable that you came to exist. It's not like that. It's not just that it's unlikely. It's the analogy has to be just right. It's much more like, I think Craig is an analogy. If you had the Earth, actually, about the size of the Earth, filled with white ping pong balls, because it's about that size. It's full of that. They're full of that, and there's one black ball, one, somewhere in there. And someone says, okay, and they're going to blindfold you, because this is how likely it is. They blindfold you and say, I want you to reach through and grab the ball. If you grab a white one, I'm killing you. If you grab the black one, you'll live. And you grab the black one. Of trillions and 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 trillions of balls, and you went straight for the black one. Now, how unlikely is it you're going to find the right one? Right? It's extremely likely you're going to be killed. I mean, the words for it, you're going to be killed. No one says if you had a bunch of sharpshooters, 10 people, someone going to do, you're going to be shot by a firing squad, and all sharpshooters miss. You don't go, boy, that happened. But statistically, it's going to happen because there's one in the show. But yeah, but there's a chance. The very first thing is, of course, not that they're all bad shots, but you have been rescued. That was on purpose. It was deliberate. And the universe the point is, the universe did not have to be life permitting. It's much, 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 much more likely it's one of those white balls, which means the universe is all death. It's far more likely. And so another reason why lottery analogy doesn't work is, like a lottery gives out numbers that are already given out. And if no one brings that number, they get another one. They keep going until someone's going to win the lottery. That's not how reality works. There's the universe. It's the universe. And so if you had 1 and 10 to the 64 zeros behind it, of all those numbers, and the slightest click means death, you have another one, and then another one, all these fine-tuned, so the numbers get astronomical big. It's overwhelming. It is to me. It's absolutely overwhelming. There's one important thing to remember. Well, I think all important. One thing real important to remember as I probably wrap up on this one, and that is, the question is not, I see this online a lot in literature, the question is not, why do humans fit perfectly within a fine-tuned universe? Why do humans fit perfectly in a fine-tuned universe? That's not the question. That's not the question. Of course they fit there. We live here. Of course we fit. The question is, why is the universe fine-tuned for life whatsoever? When it's far more likely the universe should disallow life. That's the question. It's not the question, why do we fit here? And so the typical sarcastic atheist response is going to be, it's called the anthropic principle. They're going to say, of course you fit here, dummy. It's like asking, why does that puddle fit? Why does the water perfect that shape of the hole? Because it's a puddle. It's made for that puddle. Of course it is. I'm not asking that question. If someone comes by and I drop in the water, I go, look, I'm floating. And I go, I wonder what laws develop such that there's a thing called the law of buoyancy. You go, no, dummy, of course you're floating. Yes, you got your flow. I didn't ask why I'm floating. I'm asking why there are laws of buoyancy in the first place. It's not, of course we're this way. Of course I stand up. Of course I live in gravity and I can breathe air because my lungs work here. You might say, well, God designed it that way. Fine. You say it evolved. Fine. Whatever. The point is, that's not the question. It's not why do humans fit perfectly. It's why is our universe fine-tuned for life? When it's incomprehensibly more likely there is no fine-tuning at all. None at all. And even if the universe did have life, like you said in the video, it's more likely that there'd be one little baby patch of laws that fit, and that, okay, people could, amoebas could live there, or a star could be formed, and everything else is just chaos. That's not what we have. As far as the telescope can see, it is all fine-tuned for life. I'm gonna stop there tonight because we see any questions or comments. Anything at all about anything we've covered at all tonight? Anything?
That's crazy.
It's crazy. I can't remember the constant now. I'm sorry. It's something. It's a law. I think it's the weak force of gravity. I remember I heard an analogy by one physicist said it's like you put quarters on the ground, on the ground flat, and you covered the United States of America, the entire, so 2,000 something square miles left to right, covered it, and then put quarters on top of each other to the moon, and then said blindfolded, now pick this one particular quarter. That's 1/4. In other words, what's likely you're going to find? You're not going to find it. That's how delicate it is. That's just one force. And one of the books last I read, this a few years ago, they found almost 90 of these fine-tuned constants. Scientists keep discovering over and over and over and over. The one Boyle who said it's just like someone's been monkeying around with physics, that guy's an atheist. It's like I'm telling you that there's no way. The cosmological constant, it's 10 to the 120th power. 120 zeros. It's beyond comprehension. If you really dislike science, bless your heart. But we're almost done with all science. After this, we're going to move on to some other stuff, nature, and then we're going to morality, and then we're going to get into the big chunk of the study. We're still on layer 1, and I'm going through pretty quickly on these. Okay, so stay with me. I'm sorry if you it's been a long time you've been in the class on physics. What?
We'll get to Jesus.
You will get to Jesus, sister. You will. That's the second ring. The second ring is what I call it very probable.
That's like layer 50.
Later, yeah, very probable. Then we get to, I will talk very explicitly about gospels, why we can choose the gospel, who Jesus was, and whatever. And so, but again, I'm trying to expose these things because that way I do it by. I think these things, I say, point to God. He's the best explanation, and then quite probable. Okay, any questions, comments, anything at all besides when do we get to Jesus?
Somebody else is wondering, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. You might be wondering this, let me make it explicit. This is a lot of times where people say, well, David, if you're sharing the gospel, if you're talking about why you believe something, why not just quote the Bible? The answer is because no one gives a rip what the Bible says if they're not a Christian. Most people don't give it, it's not an authoritative text. If someone came to you and said, you need to be a Muslim, why? Because the Quran says you should. You go, okay, makes sense. Are you going to convert on the spot?
Yes.
Son would, thank you, son. No one else would. Well, it says right here, Muhammad's the chief prophet. Why do you think that? Because the Quran says so. Who cares what the Quran says? What makes you think that? Well, because the Quran, why do you think the Quran's true? Because it says it's true. Well, that's what they do to you and me if you're a Christian. If you say, well, the Bible says, they don't care if it's not authoritative text. If you find a person who already respects the Bible, great, then start there. Then that's stage 2, that's that middle ring. But for the average skeptic atheist, these are the questions at the beginning. They're not even there yet. They're not ready for the Bible yet. And so, most people are not. And so I start to say, well, there are a lot of things about reality, a lot of facts about existence. I think God's the best explanation. You might not remember all 10 of these. You might make up your own. But I think these are real things scientific. Notice how none of this stuff so far, I've not quoted a bunch of theologians, though I'm one myself, that's fine. But these are just, again, facts of the universe. That they need an explanation for that, and I think God's the best explanation.